Because not everything that happens to you happened because God wanted it to happen to you. And certainly not everything that happens to you happens because the devil did it. Because if the devil did it, then God had to allow it. Sometimes I think we got the wrong word. Sometimes because I think they both start with the letter D and we get confused. Sometimes it's not the devil, it's a decision. It's just too crowded in church today. I need to free up some seats for the next week. So I don't want you to have to sit in parking or anything like that. Sometimes, and so Paul says, this didn't have to happen like this. And those are the hardest for me. Really, really the hardest for me is when I feel like this was avoidable, you know? And when I feel like I could have avoided it, but yet it's inevitable. And that's the tension, isn't it? I was talking to one of my best friends the other day, and I said, a year from now, we were going through something, and we were talking through it, and something that we couldn't understand. And I said, a year from now, we will understand why this had to happen. And he said, do you really believe that? I said, yeah, I believe that in time, God will show us. He said, no, not that part. Do you really believe it had to happen? Because what he was doing, he was reverse engineering all the decisions that led to it. And what I kind of wanted to say to him that I wasn't smart enough to say in the moment, but I've thought about it for a few weeks now, and I want to tell you, is that I've come to the place in my belief system where I no longer try to figure out whether God did it or the devil did it, because it has to pass through the same hands before it gets to me. And I've read enough of the Bible to know that God will use other people's bad decisions to get me to my destiny. And I've seen enough play out to know that Joseph at the end of his life was only able to look at his brothers and say, don't even worry about it, because you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. Which one was it? Evil or good? It was both. Why can't it be both? Why can't it be an attack from the devil that God used and put to good usage and repurposed in order to accomplish? That's what Paul is saying. He's saying, it didn't have to happen. I don't want you to blame this on God. We could have avoided this. You didn't have to date him. Your mom told you he was crazy and you wouldn't listen to anybody. But if we stay stuck in the reason, we'll miss the revelation. Because Paul says, you know, there's a reason this happened and it could have been avoided. But last night, while the storm was raging, last night I was all alone, and God showed up and reminded me that his purpose is still intact even if the ship goes down. It had to happen. It had to happen. And God doesn't tell Paul a whole series of explanations. He doesn't give him a reason. He gives him a revelation. Revelation is more powerful than reason. You can't fight the devil with a reason, because sometimes you don't know the reason. Sometimes you have to go back to who God showed you that he was. And God is very tactical in this, so he will create a situation for a revelation. Can I preach about this for a minute? So he will let Lazarus die, and he loves Lazarus. And when they tell him that Lazarus died, he'll say, I'm glad it happened. Jesus actually said, I'm glad he died. Why? Because now we've got a situation. And the situation is what enables the revelation. It's not just true because it rhymes, it's true because it's true. Up until this point, they knew him as healer. Now they needed to know him as resurrection. And so he said, I'm glad it went wrong. I'm glad it went poorly. Paul said, we must run aground on some island. Somebody say it had to happen. It had to happen. And sometimes when you ask God for a reason, he will bypass the reason and give you a revelation. You still belong to me. You're still my child. See, I don't operate by reason. If I operate by reason, sometimes I'll be up, Sometimes I'll be down. I operate by revelation. I know He is good and He does good. I know He's with me. I know He's for me. I know He'll never leave me nor forsake me. That's my revelation. Touch somebody, say, I got a revelation.